Well, we're getting awfully close to the time.
Yep.
Yep, Madam Supervisor, I have 6 o'clock if you'd like to begin.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order this Wednesday, June 10, 2020 regular meeting of the Township Board at 6 p.m. And I will call the roll. And my phone rings. Aldrich?
Here.
Bigford?
Here.
Heldmerk?
Here.
Marcy?
Here.
Osmond? Yes. Here. We have a quorum. I was waiting for somebody to answer.
Just the voice in your head.
And then I'd like to give Griffin a few minutes to talk about how the Zoom program works.
Thank you very much. Welcome to everyone who's joining our meeting today. As we have with the last few meetings that have been hosted via Zoom, I'm just going to go over a few instructions to hopefully make this meeting go fairly smoothly. As much as possible, please say your name before speaking, particularly for folks who are joining us via telephone. If you are on the telephone, please know that you can mute yourself when you're not speaking, and it's *6. Everyone else also, please do the best you can that if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. Don't click any unknown links that may be shared in the group message along with this Zoom conference. The township does not plan to share any information via that group message. So as a safety precaution, please do not click on any random links. This meeting is being recorded, and if that works successfully, it will be posted like all other township board meetings as soon as possible following the meeting. Please be respectful of those speaking and don't interrupt. If anyone is disruptive to the point of preventing the township board from conducting their business, you will get one warning for staff, and afterwards you will be removed from the meeting. The township's hosted several meetings via Zoom so far, and it is yet to be an issue. And lastly, all votes will be taken via roll call vote to ensure everyone's understanding of every township board member's vote. And lastly, please be patient with us as much as possible. We're all still learning a new system and doing the best we can to navigate technology. So we're only going to get through this as a team. So please be patient with us as much as possible. But with that, we're happy to have everybody. And Madam Supervisor, I'll turn it back over to you. Cindy, you're muted if you're speaking.
Okay, the next item is the approval of the agenda. We have a sample motion there. Does anybody care to make a motion?
I move to approve the agenda and to ratify the procedures for public participation and meeting conduct as described in the notice of public meeting via video conference.
We have a motion by Bigford. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I will I have tried to do it a couple times.
We'll go ahead and do a roll call. Bigford?
Here.
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
I'll take that as a yes. Marcy?
Yes.
And Osmond, yes. And Aldrich?
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item is public comments. I think Griffin will give some instructions about how we take those public comments, but please feel free to join in. We do want to hear from the public.
Thanks, Cindy. As you all can hopefully see on your screen, and those of you who can't see, we are at the time to take public comment. When I'm finished giving these instructions, what I'll do is I will ask for all those who would like to give public comment. I will write your name down on a speakers list. Once everyone who would like to comment is included on the list, I will say your name, and you will get 3 minutes to speak to the board as an individual and 5 minutes speaking on behalf of a group. Following the conclusion of the speakers list, if there's anyone who is not on the list and would like to speak, you will have an opportunity. So with that, is there anyone who would like to speak during this public comment period?
Jay Frederickson.
Thanks, Jay.
Dean Cappinga.
Yep, thanks, Dean. Is there anyone else present at the meeting who would like to be added to the speakers list? Please unmute yourself if I'm going to unmute some people. Does anyone who would like to speak? Mr. Riley,
John
would you
Riley.
like to be? Yep, you bet.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and start. Mr. Fredericks, you were first on the list.
Okay, I represent Riverside Estates Mobile Home Park, and we're here about the question of the no wake zones. It's an issue. We're willing to help. Mr. Riley is going to talk about some more things there, but we, not last year, but the 3 or 4 prior years, we put those buoys in and out ourselves for the township, and we cleaned them. We put them in and put decals on them, and some new ones were purchased. We got them all fixed up and put them in. Last year, I believe you hired a private contractor. I'm here to tell you, I wanted to talk second actually, but I'm here to tell you, we're here to help you. We've done it, we can do it. If that's a problem for, a stepping stone we can get over, and we're also willing to sign a release of liability if that's what you're worried about. We can supply the labor. We'll store them down at our place. We got to take them in and out of the river right there, and it'll be very, very easy. So we're concerned about loss of life, basically, because some of these wakes are huge, and there's grandkids down there, and the 24 residents that we have that live on the river have boats and things, and they're getting beaten up. So that's why we're here. I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Frederickson. Mr. Cappinga, go ahead.
Well, the county has been working on many different things. Obviously, you're working on the lakeshore, Griffin especially, all the work you've had. We made a resolution at the last meeting. It's fairly lengthy, but I'll just read one part of it. The Allen County Board of Commission requests the governor to apply her demonstrated broad use of emergency powers to address these situations which endangers life and property, and to open up FEMA funds for Allegan County in this township area. We went to every one of the houses, delivered this resolution so the people would know what we're doing. I was also at a meeting in which almost every resident called in for the last road commission meeting, Griffin. It was really good to see the energy that they had, and really some good ideas as far as some alternatives that they might look at, and maybe some cheaper solutions to a temporary fix of the road there. But we accomplished that. Also, I mentioned to you before the Tax Limitation Committee. That was comprised of Jim Story, William Brown, Larry Lautenberger, Honorable Harry Beach, Mark Evans. They approved to have us throw on a millage, a resolution for this at the November ballot. It would bring the county to 5.7, back to what the voters already agreed upon. The township could go to 1.07 and schools to 0.014. And you don't have to go to that amount. You can go up to the amount or whatever amount you want. But that will be on the ballot in November. Also, we have that groundwater study I mentioned to you before, and Griffin, you might just be interested in that. John Illich has 15 townships completed, 8,855 well logs have been reviewed, with 3,951 corrected. And they hope to get that study done by the end of June, which should be a help for all the townships and yourselves, I hope. Then just lastly, I just want to mention to you, for your constituents, that Allen County Senior Services is pleased to offer free fresh boxes to seniors. Those that are eligible are 60 and over, 55 caring for grandkids, anyone struggling to pay for food. And they offer fruit boxes, dairy boxes, vegetable boxes that they deliver to the houses. So if you know of constituents that are in that type of situation, any of those three, make sure you just go online to allencounty.org and just take a look at it. And I appreciate you giving me a chance to speak. Thank you. Good seeing you all.
Thanks, Dean.
You're welcome.
I know this is public comment, but before you leave, I was on an MMTA Zoom this morning. Is there anything relative to the CARES Act pertinent to Allegan County at this point?
There is, and it's fairly lengthy.
Okay.
John,
You want to send that to me?
it is. It's fairly lengthy. I'm better off just trying to give you, I'll email you, John, as
Would
far
you
as
please? Okay.
I will, just to give you an update.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for questioning it. Have a good meeting.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean, for being here. Mr. Riley, you want to go ahead and take the floor?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good evening, Saugatuck Township Board. So recently my wife and I purchased property just adjacent to the Hacklanders boat launch. One of the mitigating factors for us purchasing this piece of property was due to the no-wake zone within that piece of property. We have boats, we have family, we have friends, we're soon to have young children. So safety is a primary concern. During your May 20th budget amendment request, the no-wake buoys were addressed. A motion was made to approve the cost and the installation. That motion was not seconded. The buoys are clearly missing due to the cost. I heard over and over again the argument raised these buoys only benefit a few property owners. If you count the marina, the trailer park, the adjoining property owners, there are 130 plus property owners in that stretch, to be exact. As Jay mentioned earlier, our primary concern for safety is for our families, our friends, and the people who use the stretch of river. This stretch of river, for those that might not be familiar with it, it's a high traffic area with blind corners. There's a lot of traffic and there's a lot of concentrated boat traffic due to the launch, the marina, and the mobile home community in the area. I've witnessed boats speeding through daily at top speed. I've seen 3 to 4 foot plus wakes. Jay has an instance within his community where the wakes actually washed over the dock and could have easily swept a child or an adult into the river. I was there Memorial Day weekend, witnessed a pair of kayakers that were almost run down by a 28 foot plus vessel traveling at a pretty high rate of speed around that blind corner past Hacklanders. With the high water level, fast current, anyone getting knocked out of their kayak, off their dock or canoe would be in a pretty tough situation. Brenda Marcy cited an example on record of a friend that ran over a fishing boat last year where the buoys were and quote unquote went right over them. Everybody went flying. It was all good. My question to the board is what happens when it's not all good? The comment was also made in the record by 2 of the board members that for the cost of the buoys, we can get a new tree or pay for a new faucet in the bathroom. I find that a very odd comment for trade-off for mitigation to risk of life and property. You also have a statutory requirement to install these buoys. Jay and our group have offered in writing multiple options to mitigate the cost, the expense, and the time to the township. We ask that these buoys be approved for cost, and we can work out with you how we proceed forward in installing these on an annual basis. Thanks, Griffin.
Thanks, Mr. Riley. Is there anyone else, that concludes the speakers list. Is there anyone else who was not on the speakers list? We had a few people join in the middle of public comment that would like to make a comment.
Yes, I would. Brent Sheridan.
Sure, go ahead, Brent.
Yes, thank you, Griffin. I just want to reiterate some of the things, maybe add a few other points. I'd ask those of you who have gone on the record saying you have issues with placing these buoys because it benefits, relatively few people, to reconsider the impact of all the users based on the safety and consider that focus versus perceptions that this only benefits a couple people that own property. I live at 6168 Riverside. I own a small sliver just upriver from the trailer park within the no-wake zone. And to me, I've looked through the packets. Hopefully you all have as well. And to me, the question should not be over, are we liable as a township if we don't put the buoys in because we don't have the money or whatever other reason you don't want to put them in, but it should rather have to, and being sued because of that, but rather it should be, do we have a responsibility for the safety of all the users of this area? Another user I would add to this area, which borders the no wake zone, is that DNR boat launch. That is right there. That gets used extensively, and boats going fast through there. And that's right on the curve that John mentioned. You know, and do we have a responsibility to those users? Also, do we have a responsibility to follow our own township ordinance? I did not see that in the packet. I'm sure Griffin can expand if you don't know about it, but the township ordinance that says buoys shall be installed. And last but not least, as is in the township packet, and it was provided by the sheriff department to us, was the DNR's guidance of what a municipality needs to do to follow the no wake zones and what the requirements are for that. Please look at those. Please take those into consideration when hopefully you take this off the table tonight. Yes, you know, the high water affects our property. There's no question. I'm not going to deny that. Does it help me and my property and my own boat? Yes, but safety is overriding concern. You know, take all these close calls into account as well, please. I can't reiterate that enough. And lastly, I just want to close. You know, I've tried to reach out, and I will continue to. I've helped in the past. I'll help in the future if, you know, we're willing to be a part of this solution. Sure, it'd be great if you guys paid and installed all the buoys. I get it. But, you know, please take all this into consideration. You know, more than anyone else, I would hope the majority of this board, one of your big issues you ran on recently had to do with safety issues. And if this one don't kick anyone in the knee that there's a safety issue compared to a lot of things, I don't know what does. So I'm willing to be helpful and be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, Madam Supervisor, we're ready to move on.
Let's move on to review of invoices. I assume everybody had a chance to take a look at that. And if you have any questions for Mr. Graham, please let us know. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
This is Stacy. I move to approve all bills and payroll in the amount of $89,453.06 as presented.
Motion by Aldrich, is there a second?
This is Brenda. I will second.
Motion by Aldrich, supported by Marcy. Let's call the roll. Aldrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Motion carries. Let's move on to the treasurer's report. John, can you tell us what you have for us?
I sure can. Thank you. All right. As I always report, our general fund bank balance at just prior to this meeting is at $2.8 million. It's up slightly from last month. And our budget versus actual through May was actually $390,000 positive. And that's an increase from April. Spending is running 38% under budget, while revenue is running 19% under budget with 1 month left in the fiscal year. The fund balance transfers, which will take place this month, will affect the final fiscal year end, but we're in a pretty solid position on all fronts that way. On the investment front, our CD value is at $756,000. It's flat to April, end of April. I've suggested before, and I want to bring it up again tonight, that we study our investment policy and activities in the new fiscal year, especially in light of the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. A suggestion I have is that another trustee join me, and we do sort of the two trustees subcommittee thing to have meetings and some phone calls with other potential investment strategies. So I don't know, should we address that now or just think about it? But I'd like to have one other trustee join me on that. On the year-to-date fiscal year 2023 through May of 31st. Good news again, there remain no departmental level expense overages to address. On the revenue side last month, our tax administration fees, our Comcast franchise fees, which went up, and our zoning fees for marijuana businesses cumulatively are $40,000 above budget combined, which is also good. Big story for me, of course, in June, we're heavy into the preparation for summer tax bills. Goal, as always, is to have them in the mail by July 1st, if possible. There is legislation pending in Lansing that might extend the due dates and interest rules that need to be on the bills, and we're all concerned that they move before the bills get printed. The county and some of our disbursement partners, the schools, have been understandably a little behind schedule in providing necessary information to the township and having their boards vote. But things are trickling in, and Kyle and I made a great stab at getting things started here yesterday, and I'm remaining optimistic at this point. And let's see. Oh, I did want to mention, as I said to Dean, I was on a Zoom call with the Michigan Municipal Treasurers Association this morning, and we're all kind of dealing with these same issues, obviously, about can we make the deadline? Do we have the information we need? Is Lansing going to change any of the rules? And we're standing by, but we're ready to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that report. Shall we move on to approval of the minutes from the last regular meeting on May 13? I assume everybody had a chance to review that
Yes.
and submit any corrections to Abby, or do them now?
Yep.
I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of the May 13th, 2020 regular meeting as presented. Aldrich.
Motion by Aldrich, is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Helmrich. All those in favor, oh, no, I can't do all those in favor anymore. Aldrich,
Yes.
Helmrich,
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Marcy,
Yes.
Bigford,
Yes.
motion carries. The minutes have been approved. On page 2. We had some correspondence, one from Fire Lieutenant, I think Lieutenant Mantles, about the fire flow at North Shore. One from Mr. Frederickson about the no-wake buoys. One from Eder about junk pickup. And one from Riley about the buoys. I suggest that we accept that as information. Is there a motion? I guess we don't have to do a motion on that. We'll just accept it as information. Next, we have some unfinished business. And this is the budget. So we need to have a public hearing on the budget information. So I'd like to open the public hearing at 6:23. And to hear if there's anybody from the public. I'd like to follow the same procedures that we did with the public comments and see if there's any comments that we have. Mr. Graham?
Absolutely. As the supervisor stated, we'll use the same format as before. Is there anyone on the call who would like to speak during public comment? Please say your name and I'll add you to the speakers list. Please be aware you may be muted, so please unmute yourself and say your name if you'd like to speak.
Brent Sheridan.
Thanks, Brent. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, Brent, if you want to go ahead, we'll do another call for speakers after you're finished. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Griffin. I would just ask the board to support the manager's recommendation that he's put into the budget for the $1,500 for the buoys. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Anyone else? Last call. Anyone like to speak on the budget? Hearing none, Madam Supervisor, floor is back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. We have discussed this budget at the 2 previous meetings at great length, and we're at the point where we can take action. We didn't get a lot of public comment, which is kind of sad, but is there anybody that has any questions about the proposed budget and the General Appropriations Act?
So I have a question for Manager Graham. You include the Township Board priority list update in the budget, which I think is great. So is it appropriate to comment on that now, or would that be a separate time?
If I can, I think the first step, Madam Supervisor, would be to close the public hearing. Then if the
That's
board would
correct.
like
I'm
to.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
So having heard the public, we'll close the public hearing at 6:26
Okay.
and open it up to board discussion.
Sure. And then, John, as you mentioned, the reason the Township Board priority list is included in the budget is that those were the goals and priorities that staff used to formulate this budget.
Right.
Again, it's going to be up to you all as a board. I mean, I would think it's appropriate if you would like to comment on any of those at this time. But I would say it's not an update. It's the one, or it is the goal list that was originally adopted by the board in
It's a
February.
reminder. Yes, I am. Yep. Well, in that sense, yeah, because as I said, it's not specifically budget related, but it's in the budget packet. So I would just like to mention 2 of our priority list goals to my colleagues, not to discuss tonight, but perhaps to consider to add to the agenda in July or August. And those 2 are, 1, under our number 1 goal, financial stewardship, was millage planning. And I think we need to have more discussion and even education on what all is entailed in that. So we're ready to move, if we choose to, on a pretty substantial and important issue. And the second one, which is under our 3rd goal, organizational improvement, and that is to rebid professional services and contractors. And I know we've successfully recently redone our deals with our zoning administrator and our assessor. And I just think for the purposes of transparency and consistency, in the next few months, we should look at least doing an official RFP for both our legal representation and our auditor. And they would be welcome to join that process. But I just think we want to move towards that decide every 2 or 3 years, as a lot of townships do, that just happens as a matter of fact. And again, that's not a budget issue for tonight, but the list was in here. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Is there anybody else that has any questions before I call for a motion?
I just wanted Mr. Graham to be able to clarify. I mean, I think the answers are in here, but I think it's important because of the change in the ambulance expense now to the new contract with Life, and also that we'll have to adjust the special assessment to half of the township taxpayers, but that's all in here. correct? The new rate, and we still come out with a balanced budget.
I believe that's correct. I think that we did a great job with the budget. I think there's some things that we can celebrate our accomplishments. And unless there's any other questions for Mr. Graham, I would like to call for a motion.
Sure. And Cindy, if I can real quick, John, to directly answer your question, yes, the anticipated updated amounts for ambulance service are included in the budget. There's a specific fund used to provide that service that's funded directly from a special assessment for those properties that benefit from that service. So I'm happy to discuss it more when we get to that specific agenda item. That special assessment will still need to be updated down the road to reflect the increase in costs to provide the service. But in terms of the budget being our plan and policy document, it is included.
Oh, thank you. I just thought that was good to point out because it's substantial, but we're all behind maintaining that assessment.
Absolutely.
Well, in that case, I'd like to offer a motion that we accept the fiscal year 2020-21 budget as presented to us tonight by our manager, Graham.
And a resolution to adopt the General Appropriations Act.
Yes, and a resolution to adopt the General Appropriations Act.
For Saugatuck Township to
For
define the
Saugatuck
powers.
Township.
Define the powers and the duties of the township officers in relation to the administration of the budget and to provide remedies for refusal or neglect to comply with the requirements of this resolution.
Yes.
Okay, so motion by
I didn't
Helmrich.
see that in here. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay. Motion by Helmrich. Is there support?
This is Brenda. I'll support.
Supported by Marcy. I'll call the, is there any more discussion? I'll call the roll. Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Osman, yes. Aldrich,
Yes.
Bigford,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0. And we're ready to move on to our next item, which is the Pride Month proclamation.
No Wake Bowies.
Oh, no wake buoys?
Yes.
Wait a minute.
We're on,
We're on unfinished business. No wake
Yes.
buoys, I'm sorry. At our
Yes.
last meeting, we tabled the request for a budget transfer. And that's really what we're looking at tonight is the request for a budget transfer or a budget amendment to allow for the buoys to be placed. Is there any discussion before I call for a motion?
This
This is Brenda.
go ahead, Brenda.
So Cindy, what did you just ask for? Comments?
Comments or questions before I ask for a motion?
Okay, no, I just want to tell you all that 2 weeks ago, we had an incident on Silver Lake where we had to call the water police. We had someone going extremely fast, and we did have little children down there. And the father of the little children is the one who called because they were on one of our docks fishing, and the waves did come over. And luckily, it did not sweep them off. But as I think it was Mr. Frederickson who mentioned earlier, it really is a safety issue. And so I'm just glad we're revisiting it. And I did actually have a couple sleepless nights after. So that's all I want to say is I really believe it's extremely important. And I really appreciate all the support that Brent and the other people in the association, the speakers tonight, have given us.
Thank you,
That's all.
Brenda. Is there anything else that anybody wants to say about the buoys?
This
Or
is
the,
Bigford.
actually, it's not about the buoys, it's about the budget transfer. If it weren't for a budget transfer, this would not be in front of you.
Okay.
This is Bigford. May I
Yes,
speak?
Abby?
A couple things. First, I wanted to emphasize that I don't think any of us were saying that this isn't important. It was just, is this our responsibility? And we wanted to get more information. And with that, if our manager Graham could summarize some of the research you did. Thank you for doing it, by the way. And if you could kind of give us a report on what you found over the last month of what other townships do and any other information that's relevant.
I'd be happy to. Give me 1 second and I can really put a summary right on the screen, hopefully for everyone who's able to join us via video can see. But as you all mentioned, the specific questions that were really asked of staff following the May 13th meeting were to research specifically what other townships do in this situation, as well as work with the township attorney to determine which potential liability exists. In regard to liability, I'm not going to speak on that at length. I am not an attorney, as you all know, but with conversations with our attorneys, similar to a lot of situations that face townships, there is absolutely risk and liability associated with not proceeding with this service, and risk of a lawsuit. However, legal counsel and staff are not aware of any recorded court decision that held the township liable for not installing no-wake buoys. I think the noteworthy point to make there is there are numerous no-wake zones across the state that go unmarked. There are also no-wake zones throughout the state that are marked for part of the year and unmarked for other parts of the year, are marked certain years and not marked other years due to any number of situations, if that's equipment, if that's finances, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, there's absolutely risk when it comes to the township deciding whether or not to install buoys moving forward, but it was not the impression from legal counsel or from me as staff that that should be the reason not to decide to or not to install the buoys. I think some great comments were made otherwise. I mean, there are a number of other factors regarding safety and responsibility and the financial implications that probably should take front seat in your mind. Maybe the more interesting note, when it comes to buoys, I spoke with a number of communities of different sizes and shapes and types of communities, and really what I found is there is no one size fits all to how to successfully manage buoys. If anything, what I learned is almost every community I spoke to struggles one way or another when it comes to buoys. They're dirty, they can be heavy. They just seem to be a pain for many communities. So again, I don't think that's out of the ordinary to what we're dealing with. At the end of the day, it's really just a decision about, are we going to make this work or not, and how much resource are we willing to dedicate to this. But to not belabor the point too long, as you can see there, the township board really has, in staff's, based on staff's research, really have 4 options before you all today. I'm also willing to give a little bit more of a recommendation if that's something you all would like based on some of the conversations I've had, but I'll stop there from now and just leave the 4 options that really sum up your decision tonight.
Thank you, Griffin. Is there anybody else that has any questions for Griffin or comments before I call for a motion?
Well,
This is Brenda again. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's right. It's Helmrich. I'd like to ask Griffin, in light of what he just said, because we all acknowledge we're late because this got tabled last month and boats are out there. Do you have a preference of the 4 options?
I do, and if I can speak candidly, my preference would be, if the township board would like to move forward with buoys, to authorize the budget amendment and authorize staff to install the buoys. And then staff can move forward with the volunteers and or the contractor and get these installed as soon as possible, as well as staff will continue to work to find a longer term solution on this. I think you all really have the option to direct staff to get the job done and leave those actual operational aspects up to staff to sort out the details.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments before I ask for a motion?
This is Brenda again. I have a question for Griffin.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. Griffin, I was just wondering in the research that you did anyone cite the high water as an issue that would compel us to do that? To put the buoys in?
No, I think high water is on everyone's mind, but it wasn't any more or less of a determining factor in how many of these communities manage their buoy programs. They're attempting, I'm going to make an assumption similarly to what I assume the township is attempting to accomplish, which is to find a safe, cost-effective, and reliable way to annually install and remove their buoys.
This is Stacy Aldrich. I want to say I apologize if I seemed particularly insensitive. I think it was the last meeting kind of merged into our budget or our money issues, and it was, I was just wondering if we could investigate other options, which we are now. But I believe with the high water, it's a safety issue at this point this year, and maybe during the year we could work with Mr. Frederickson and maybe come up with another solution. But I feel right now that we really should put the buoys in as soon as possible.
Would you like to make that into a motion?
Okay.
Can I interrupt? I'm so
Yes.
sorry, Stace. I think I might have just an amendment to the motion that might satisfy everyone. Would you mind if I go, Stace?
Yeah, go.
Okay. So I'd like to move to approve the requested no wake buoy budget amendments as submitted and authorize the township manager to proceed with purchasing the necessary buoy equipment and having them installed in the Kalamazoo River, and direct staff to explore options that would relieve the township of the responsibility of maintenance, storage, and installation removal of the buoys going forward.
We have a
would second
motion. We have a motion from Bigford. Is there support?
I will support that, Aldrich.
Any other discussion? No other discussion. I'll call the roll. Bigford,
Yes?
Aldrich,
Yes.
Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy. Brenda, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry.
Osmond, yes. Motion carries. And we can move on to the Tri-Community Joint Board Council meeting. I think John maybe will have some comments about that.
Yes, and well, my first comment is this will remain on the agenda until this thing actually happens. So I just wanted to throw out there, we're not giving up on this. We all know the limitations we're dealing with COVID-19. And I just want to, suggest, we don't have to vote on this, but I would think it might be prudent now that we aim for a date in September to do this joint meeting with the councils of Saugatuck and Douglas. And I'm willing to keep in communication with them about this. There's been discussion in terms of a locale, like a neutral locale that's not one of our municipal offices. The SCA has a new outdoor space where this could possibly be held. There's always the high school has 2 or 3 different meeting rooms. I'm not sure when the library is going to be open, but that'd be kind of cool too. So I just want to bring, as I said, I'm going to bring this up every month till we actually have a date and work on a joint agenda, and hope you all can still support this effort. Thank you.
Is there any discussion from any board members? If not, we'll accept that as information and move on to the fire department budget. Mr. Janik, do you have anything that you'd like to talk to us about as we tackle this topic?
Thank you, Madam Supervisor and trustees. Appreciate you giving us an opportunity to present the budget As you may be aware, the budget consists of a millage of 2.20 mils levied against the real property taxable value in the fire district. I'm anticipating the budget is self-explanatory. I can share with you. If you have questions, please let me know. I can share with you that we held all wage increases out of sensitivity to a lot of people out of work. I realize that sentiment is not shared with all jurisdictions, but that's what we did at the fire district. There's no cost of living. There was nothing. It's going to be reevaluated in 4 to 6 months. There's talk of hazard pay for firefighters. We have no idea what's going to happen with that. That's up to the Senate. So the other thing I could share with you is we did $151,000 in grants this year. The biggest one was a $148,000 grant from FEMA, which is very competitive. So we had a great stellar grant team. We did $9,800 in cost recovery, which mainly was from highway activity, commercial traffic, semis that don't pay any taxes within the fire district. So those were extensive, more than an hour. Cost recovery, the team is implemented, and we do try to recapture those costs. Stacy, I don't want to steal anything from you. We've gotten literally hammered with fires, 6 fires in the last 30 days. Today, there was 11 calls. It was like a bomb dropped. So we even canceled training tonight because we're worn out. So interesting times. We're not complaining. We feel and know the township supports us. Everyone is working very hard, as well as we recognize you are doing the same. So public safety is foremost on our minds. Everyone has been healthy during the COVID pandemic. It has been a challenge. COVID-19 has fundamentally changed the way we work, live, and think. It's changed a lot of things for us. So with that said, I will see if Stacy wants to add anything or if there's any questions.
I think it looks good, Chief. Yeah, I looked through it carefully and I don't see anything that looks out of line at all. So I move to approve the 2020-2021 Saugatuck Township Fire District as presented.
We have a motion by Aldrich. Is there a second?
I'll support. This is Brenda.
Motion by Aldrich, supported by Marcy. I'll call the roll. Aldrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Bigford,
Yes.
Helmrich,
Yes.
Osmond, yes. Motion carries. And now we can move to the Pride Month proclamation.
Thank you.
Madam Supervisor, if I can interrupt real quick, I'd also like to just acknowledge the fact that the township's other fire district board representative, Eric Beckman, is on the call today, and appreciate Chief taking the time to be here to answer questions for the board.
Did Eric want to add anything? Do you know, Griffin, or?
I don't, and I apologize for interrupting. I just think it's nice. The township's got a number of residents who dedicate a lot of time to serving the community, and Eric is absolutely one of them. So just want to acknowledge his presence on the call.
Griffin, thank you. It's Eric. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you for passing the budget, and we appreciate the support from the township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Bigford. May I make a comment?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you, Chief Janik, and your whole team for your work on the budget, and in particular for being really conscientious of, the current situation everyone's in, and being generous and freezing your wage increases, and also being conscientious in pursuing grants and cost recovery. We appreciate all your work.
Thank you, Abby. Well, Credit is to the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, before we move on, is there anybody else who would like to comment on the fire board budget that we approved? Okay, now we can move on to the Pride Month proclamation. I think that last year we approved this at Brenda's request or Brenda's suggestion. I would like to hear if Brenda has anything to comment on the proclamation.
No, I feel like we were trendsetters last year. I'm so happy to see the flag outside of the city as well. And I think it makes an important statement of acceptance, and I'm all for it.
Anybody else have comments or questions before we call for a motion?
I guess my question is, are we supposed to read it or just adopt it?
I don't know, Griffin.
I'm sorry, did you ask me something?
Yes, are we supposed to read the proclamation or just make a motion?
That's the township board's preference. The one comment I would make, if I can, is I've heard some comments about last year the township board elected to fly the pride flag outside the township hall as well. If that's something the township board would like to do again this year, I would encourage you all to consider adding that to the suggested motion.
I was going to do that.
I was too.
Wow. And I was going to apologize to the public because now that we meet on the second Wednesday, we're a little bit into June, which is Pride Month. We did this earlier last year, but that's just a twist of the calendar. So on that,
Maybe next year we remember to go the month before, and
I guess we could.
yeah. So
Well,
that we get right
I'd like
on it on June 1st.
I'd like to move to approve the proposed proclamation designating June 2020 as Pride Month in Saugatuck Township, and that encourages residents to reflect on the ongoing struggle for equality members of the LGBTQ community face and celebrate the contributions that enhance the township. And that as of tomorrow, the township, as it did last year, will fly the pride flag throughout the month of June.
Thank you. We have a motion by Helmrich. Is there a support?
This is Bigford. I'll support.
Supported by Bigford. Is there any further discussion? No additional discussion. I'll call the roll. Helmrich,
Yes.
Bigford,
Yes.
Aldrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
and Osmond, yes. Motion carries. And now we will move on to the preparedness and response plan that has been assembled by our manager and looks very complete and very complicated. Well, not complicated, but very thorough. And encompasses 11 pages of document that he spent a great amount of time putting together. I would like also to say that we acknowledge what good work he did and go ahead and confirm the plan. So is there any questions before I ask for a motion?
I'd like to just add, or maybe I should do this after, I don't know. I want to commend Manager Graham, who conducted an hour-long training yesterday in Township Hall. For those of us that are working in the township office, it was also attended by Zoning Administrator Wells and Assessor Harris. And staff is back, including our admin assistant, Carol Bachman. It was pretty cool to see everyone there, and Griffin did an amazing job going through this plan with everyone assembled. And I hope my colleagues that are not in the office as often have had a chance to read it.
I can't wait to go in and see what you've done.
Okay, is there any more questions for Mr. Graham before we proceed to request a motion?
This is Brenda.
Yes, Brenda.
Am I on? Okay.
Yes.
You can't tell when you're on the phone.
Right.
So I wanted to ask a question more about the return to work transition. Is that part of this motion or is that a separate motion?
Griffin?
So I may need some more clarification, Brenda, because we're not looking for any specific return to work transition motion at this time. Following the preparedness and response plan in your packet, I did include a copy of the press release that was distributed by the township that includes some information about the township's return to work transition, but our return to work transition has already begun. I mean, we're mid-swing. We brought staff back to the office this week. We'll be opening back up to the public with restrictions next week. So,
Okay.
if you had additional questions there, I'm happy to do the best I can, but there's not a specific motion on that transition.
Okay, so I just had a comment or a question about individuals medically able to tolerate will be encouraged to tolerate a mask, will be encouraged to do so. That concerns me for everyone else in the office. It seems like the retailers downtown have done a really, really good job of making that mandatory. And maybe for people who are medically unable, we could meet separately outside or something like that. This is my only concern about the plan. And I know that statement is not in, I don't think that statement is in the preparedness and response plan. So if it's just not relevant to this discussion, that's fine, and we can talk about that later.
I think, Brenda, that is outside of this plan. This is just
Okay,
the plan
good.
that we're mandated to have by the executive order. And,
Right, okay.
And whether or not it can be required to wear a mask is different for government than
Right.
it is for private businesses. And there are some HIPAA things that we have to be concerned about, asking people about their medical conditions. So
Right, of course.
we can address that at another time. Any other questions
Okay.
about the preparedness plan? No, if not, I will entertain a motion to act on this item. Anybody want to make a motion?
I move to confirm the updated COVID-19 preparedness and response plan as presented and prepared by the township manager. That's Aldrich.
Okay, motion by Aldrich. Is there support?
This is Bigford. I'll support.
Supported by Bigford. Is there any other additional discussion? If not, I'll call the roll. Aldrich,
Yes.
Bigford,
Yes.
Helmrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes,
Osmond, yes. Motion carries. And we can move on to life ambulance service agreement. This is another item that we've talked about at previous meetings and reviewed in some detail. So we all kind of already know what it is. I suspect that there's somebody in the audience who maybe wants to comment on that, or maybe we have questions for Tony Schippa. Is there anybody that has questions or comments before I entertain a motion?
Madam Supervisor, if I may, as you were indicating, Mr. Tony Schippa is here, and he's the township's appointed representative on the Emergency Services Committee. He's been working extremely hard with the rest of that committee to try to find a longer-term solution to continue to provide high-quality ambulance service for the southern half of the township. I believe he has with him a representative from Life Ambulance who, in the proposed agreement, would be the company taking place of AMR. So if any board members had specific questions about the contract or maybe specific questions about Life Ambulance, their priorities, what they do for the community, or anything else, I think they would be more than happy to answer questions for you. I appreciate both of them taking the time to be here.
Thank you, Griffin. Tony, do you have anything that you want to say to us as representative before we make a motion and take action?
What I would say is that the Life Ambulance rep is John Pinkster. He is online here with us. A very good young man. Working with Life Ambulance has been a pleasure. They've been willing to work with us and make things work for our communities, and it's going to be a good fit. I'll tell you that John even took time out here, I want to say probably 8 days ago, if I remember right, that he came over here and he took a ride with me so we could go around and see what the Saugatuck Township area was going to be like, the southern half of the service area that we're talking about, and showed him some stuff, and he took lots of notes and commented a number of times this would be good for a information packet and a training packet for the new crews that would be coming in to be servicing our area. So they're willing to and want to work very diligently to make the service good in this area. And again, John is here to answer any questions. I know that there were some comments that Mr. Griffin made through emails about some concerns, some suggestions about the ambulance contract. And my understanding, talking with John a couple days ago, that all those things are being addressed if they haven't already been finished. And then we'll be looking at those things tomorrow night at the ambulance board meeting also. And I guess I'd ask John if he has any comments or thoughts for where we're going here with this ambulance service.
Sure. Well, thank you, Tony. Appreciate the intro there. And I appreciate you referencing me as young man. That's always a good thing. I've been with Life EMS, just so everybody's aware now, for 23 going on 24 years. So certainly near and dear to my heart. We've served in many capacities throughout many municipalities over the years here. Currently serve over 10 counties in West Michigan, and locally owned and nationally known. So thank you all for allowing us to come here this evening. We did review many of the suggestions that were brought forth by Mr. Graham there, and also several other suggestions brought forth by other board members from other municipalities. And we're working to incorporate as many of those into the agreement as we can. Obviously, I don't know that all of those can I speak to this evening, but we are certainly incorporating a few of those. I did want to highlight in particular one that I thought the board would be interested in. These were bullet pointed out, and I'm not sure if the group had received a bullet pointed list of this, but the final item on that particular list from Saugatuck Township and Mr. Graham was related to the fees. This addendum A that we had, which described our emergency service fees throughout the response area. And that's, of course, one of the primary reasons that Life EMS is being selected to move forward is AMR's fees, as I understand, have been increased greatly. We are looking to obviously maintain our fees much more in line with what the community expects. And I wanted to address that. So if I could just let you folks know that we are adding some language into that addendum that states the following. And it states, and again, this is draft form to be reviewed by the Emergency Services Committee tomorrow night, but the above fees shall be in effect for a period of 1 year and may be revised at Life EMS at its discretion, implemented following a 30-day notice to municipalities. Any rate change requested before 1 year from the previous adjustment will require majority approval of the municipalities. So we wanted to put that language in there to address some of the concerns of what if we were just going to look at moving the fees without notice, without consulting municipalities, and without correspondence regarding that. So we believe that does help address that. I'd also like to point out that we have maintained the same fee structure since our last proposal a year ago. And I think that's important to note as well. And if the group had any questions, we would be happy to provide references from our current Allegan communities that we serve. In particular, some of our communities like Allegan Township or the city of Allegan. Would be happy to speak on behalf of the fees that have changed over the years. Certainly the way we look at those fees is we evaluate not leaving dollars on the table from the ambulance perspective, rather than just increasing them for no particular reason. So as the insurance companies offer to pay more, and believe me, the insurance companies don't like to pay more, they tend to try and hold on to those dollars. So we don't see those increases terribly often. And it's typically the private insurance companies that do increase their structures over time more than anybody else. And so then we try and look at how do we levy our fees enough to capture those dollars so we're not leaving dollars on the table. So that's really how we judge that and how we move those forward over time. But certainly we added that language, and I wanted to at least make sure everybody was aware of that highlight, because I think that's a significant one. And would be happy to field any questions from anybody else in the group here.
John, this is John Helmrich. Thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. We know how hard you've worked with everyone involved here to bring this forward. And you addressed the only question I was going to ask, was looking at the bullet points that our manager Graham sent to our representative Tony Shippa, that those were being addressed. So thank you for bringing that up yourself. And as long as we still have, another review process by both our manager and our attorney to see how much of these can be incorporated, that's a good thing. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening.
Cindy, this is
Are
Brenda.
there other
May
comments or
I?
questions?
Yes, this is Brenda.
Yes, Brenda.
I just wanted to acknowledge Tony. From the time I started attending meetings, which I think was August of 17, he's probably been at every one with more and more information about ambulances. He's done so many studies. He brought us statistics about what's working and what's not. And I just want to reiterate that we so appreciate his level of expertise and the fact that he would donate so much time to us. That's all.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brenda. Is there any other questions or comments before I ask for a motion?
Madam Supervisor, this is Greg.
Hi, Greg.
May I comment?
Yes, please.
If Tony Shippa feels we should go with Life Ambulance, we should go with Life Ambulance.
Right.
I'm for this. I was a big AMR supporter. I'm also a Life Ambulance supporter. And I think this would be great for the township. And I hope the trustees will consider this agreement. And my personal feeling is I'm grateful Tony Shippa is involved in this. So thank you.
We are too.
Yep.
Thank you. Is there anybody that would like to make a motion?
I would love to. This is Brenda. I move to approve the proposed service agreement with Life Ambulance and authorize the township clerk to sign it on behalf of the township board, contingent upon successful review by the township manager and the township attorney.
I have a motion by Marcy. Is there support?
I will support Aldrich. Oh, sorry.
It's all right. Go for it.
Okay, I'll support.
Okay, is there any additional discussion? But I have a motion by Marcy, supported by Aldrich. Is there any further discussion?
This is Bigford. I would just also like to thank Tony Shippa for your time and dedication and all your work, and just most of all to your commitment to securing quality ambulance service for your community. We really appreciate you, Tony.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Cindy, you're on mute.
Cindy, I think you're muted.
I am.
Oh, you're good.
My son and daughter-in-law are making a lot of noise. But we have a motion by Marcy, supported by Aldrich, to approve the proposal. So I will call, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Marcy? Marcy? Oh, Brenda, you're muted. Okay, I'll skip Marcy for now. Aldrich?
Yes. I think Cindy's having phone problems.
Okay, Bigford.
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh.
Okay, Marcy?
Yes.
I'm going to turn off my video and see if that helps.
For a limb on some wires in front of 91450.
Okay, let's try it again. Aldrich, yes.
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Yes. Bigford?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes. Motion carries.
All right. And if I
And
may
we'll
just,
move on to,
if I may just thank the board there for the vote of confidence there. We look forward to working with Saugatuck Township. And like everyone else, Tony, thank you for your work as well. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
thanks, John, and thanks, Tony. Okay, we can move on to the Streetlight District Special Assessments. Griffin, do you want to do any introduction?
Sure, I'll keep it very brief. These are not new special assessments. Actually, many of these special assessments have been in place for many, many years. They are used to provide street lights to a number of subdivisions in the township. And over the last year and through some review by staff and our attorney, we've determined that it would be a good practice for the township to annually adopt a resolution setting the assessment role and levying assessments for these districts. So that's what you see in front of you. And it will also be staff's goal to bring a similar resolution before the board annually moving forward.
Thank you, Griffin. Is there any questions or comments for Griffin before I call for a motion?
I'd just like to thank Griffin for, pushing us to do this. We talked about certain things that should be done on an annual basis relative to whether it's special assessments or just other votes that the board should be taking. So I was happy to work with him. We've loaded the new rates for these assessments in the summer tax bills. And again, thank you, Griffin. And I strongly support us doing this on a regular basis to increase transparency.
Thank you, John. Are there any more comments or questions before I call for a motion? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion for the special light assessment districts.
I'd like to move to approve the, Helmrich here, sorry. Move to approve the adoption of resolution number 2020-09, a resolution to confirm the township's light district assessment roles and levying assessments for 2020 as presented.
I have a motion by Helmrich. Is there support?
This is Brenda. I will support.
Motion by Helmrich, supported by Marcy. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Helmrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes. Aldrich?
Yes.
And Bigford?
Yes.
Motion carries. Code enforcement process overview and options. I think this is a big chunk of information for us to absorb. There's only so much we can do with the resources that we have. There are some options, and I'd like Griffin to take a moment to review this with us.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Let me try to get the actual memo in front of you. As we're doing this, I would also like to acknowledge that this memo was prepared by our zoning administrator, Lene Wells. Her and I really work together when it comes to the township's planning, zoning, and other code enforcement practices. One of the things we've really noticed over the last year is not only that we've seen a steady increase in code enforcement or reported code enforcement violations, but candidly that we are struggling to keep up with the current amount of time and financial resources available to dedicate to them. So I know in some of my conversations with you all over the last several days about the packet, there were some questions about what is staff trying to say, or are we saying something between the lines when it comes to this memo? And I'll be very direct. The purpose of this memo is to let you all know as a board that staff is struggling when it comes to our code enforcement process. Largely, it's due to the nature of code enforcement in and of itself. It's a low success rate task. And the other problem is when it comes to the size of our community, it's going to be nearly impossible to ever be able to break even when it comes to the time and resources necessary to dedicate to this service. So if anything, this is a signal from staff to you all as a board, letting you all know right up front that this is something we struggle with. However, we also wanted to be very clear that there are potential options that the township board could consider moving forward to pursue a heightened enforcement process. However, all of them are going to require more time and more resources. So if I can, really, I see three options for the board tonight. I think the first one is the board acknowledging this information, going, we recognize the struggles our staff are dealing with, and we'd ask them to continue to do the best they can with the practices they've had over the last year. Option number two is really the board going, we would like to pursue one of these other options, but in that you all would have to also determine where you're going to get additional funding from. And really what that means is what other service would you cut? And lastly, and maybe one that I would encourage some serious consideration in, is recognize that this is an area we could absolutely improve in, and consider it as we move forward and potentially discuss additional funding sources for the township, that this could be a way to justify those additional tax dollars, because it really could be a value add for the community. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, I'd really like to thank Lene for all of her work on not only compiling this memo for you all, but on our code enforcement overall. And other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Griffin. I just have a couple of comments to make. Having been in code enforcement for the last 34 years, it is extremely time consuming. You have low compliance and expensive prosecution if you want to take it to the next level. It's a very difficult procedure. Everything has to be documented. If you're going to write a ticket, you're going to get people who don't pay their ticket, and then your next step is to go to court. And it just is very time consuming and very involved. I think what the staff is doing right now is they're doing the best that they can, and we just need to acknowledge that the resources that they have available to them at this time just are not going to produce the kind of code enforcement compliance everybody would like to see. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. And if you have any questions for Griffith, I'm sure he'd be happy to try.
Well, this is Helmrich. I have a comment. I just want to say I'm very happy and pleased to see that this is an agenda item. And I know she's not with us tonight, but I want to thank Lene Wells, our zoning administrator, for taking the time to produce this document and offer us some options, because I understand everything that Supervisor Osmond just said relative to the expense and the time involved. But I also feel, as a resident of the township, that in many ways code enforcement is such a vital issue to our quality of life and our property values. So again, I think anything we can do, beginning the conversation, I want to applaud. And I know we're not asking for any action tonight, but I love seeing these options here. And I hope we can spend some time exploring them further as we move forward. And I do want to acknowledge, because I do know that Lene Wells, zoning administrator, in working with Griffin Graham, the manager, they have done probably more code enforcement in the last year than maybe has ever been done before in the township. So it's a step. And I think that we're discussing it and it's on our radar is great. I hope it does not fall off the radar. And thank you.
Thank you, John. Does anybody else have any additional comments or information or questions before we move on? I can't read it.
Wife says you can't. Do it again. Wife says you can't take the chicken, you will work hard. I don't get it.
His wife says, cook the chicken. You all work hard. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Where did that come from?
Jake.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is the June 2020 budget amendments and interfund transfer authorization report requests. This is kind of a year-end report that we do to make sure that our budget is complete at the end of the year when we transfer money from one to another where it didn't get spent and it did get spent. And I'd like Griffin to introduce us to that, if he's still there.
Sure. Yep. I'd be happy to. I think really the noteworthy piece for these is, as the supervisor mentioned, is these are largely some end of the year budget amendments to clean up and ensure that we don't go over any of our departmental allocations. As you can see from them in front of you, they're largely reductions, and that's due to some frugal financial management over the years. And as Treasurer Helmrich referenced at the beginning, throughout the year, there's been comments made of we've been a percentage under budget when it comes to both revenues and expenditures. These are some of the corrections for that. But maybe most noteworthy is when it comes to the requested transfer authorizations. The second line there that reads 12,000. 2 years ago, that would have been over $110,000 originally. This year, that was budgeted at $62,000, and we've been able to reduce that to 12,000, and that is the justifiable cost reimbursement for the cemetery sexton salary and a share of our general liability and property insurance. That's the same amount that's going to be included in the budget this next year. I point that out because it's been one of the goals of the township board to get those transfers under control. And if anything, with approval tonight, you all should be really proud that we were able to do that probably a full year ahead of time. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but otherwise, staff requests the approval of these amendments and transfer requests.
Thank you, Griffin. We are extremely proud of you for getting this under control and taking, making all the efforts you did to make it transparent, easy to understand, and easy to read. And this is not in any way to disparage Mr. Helmrich's budget from last year, where he went cold with no help and no experience in governmental budgeting and put together something that we could live with. And I really appreciate that from John and Griffin as well. Everybody's gone over and above our expectations. So if there's any more comments or questions before I call for a motion.
I have a quick comment, Supervisor Osmond. Even having said that, the challenges of putting a budget together last year, you will remember that the board, we were able to start lowering this fund transfer requirement last year. And I want to commend Manager Graham for taking that even a further step forward. That was a goal of the board. And as I said, we started last year and you've been able to do even more than we could. So thank you.
Thank you to both of you. I know that it was extremely frustrating for John last year, and Griffin spent a lot of time on it this year, and some of it with me. And I think he's produced a budget that we can all support. So I would entertain a motion.
This is Brenda.
Yes.
I'll move to approve the requested June 2020 budget amendments as submitted and authorize the township treasurer and deputy clerk to make the requested interfund transfers.
Thank you. Motion by Marcy. Is there support?
I will support.
Support by Aldrich. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the roll. Marcy?
Yes.
Aldrich?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Griffin and John, both of you, for working so hard on this over the past 2 years. We have some appointment term expirations coming up. I'm going to leave that again to Griffin, just to give a quick review.
Absolutely. The township's adopted appointment policy outlines that either the township manager or the township clerk will make an announcement prior to the expiration of any township board or commission terms. So as you see in front of you, there are 5 terms set to expire at the end of the month. 2 on the Planning Commission, 3 on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So the first step is for those to be announced to you all as the board. And the second step would be with direction as proposed in the suggested motion would be for staff to post notices of these openings consistent with the adopted appointment policy, and then bring any submitted applications and folks interested for appointment or potential reappointment before you all at a future meeting.
I have a procedural question. And it's just simply the timing aspect, because obviously all 5 of these are expiring at the end of this month and there are meetings coming up. But we were all committed to always posting and seeking other prospective parties to apply. And also typically we've heard from the person whose term is expiring if they're interested in serving again. So is that all still doable under this time frame, in that we wouldn't be able to affirm any of this until July?
Absolutely, because there's currently no scheduled Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, and the next Planning Commission meeting will be June 22nd, which the current terms still apply, and the next meeting would be towards the end of July, and it would be my assumption that the board would want to make appointments at the July meeting, so we would have folks appointed in time. So procedurally, I don't see any concern.
Okay, no, I just wanted to clarify that, because it did strike me as kind of a short notice, but there's been a lot of extenuating circumstances out there.
That is an understatement. There have been a lot of extenuating circumstances out there. So is there any further questions for Griffin before I call for a motion? None. Would somebody like to make a motion, please?
I move to acknowledge the aforementioned Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals term expirations and direct the township manager to post notice of the openings consistent with the township's adopted appointment policy.
I'll support that. Helmrich.
Okay, we have a motion by Aldrich, supported by Helmrich. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion. I will call the roll. Aldrich?
Yes.
Helmrich?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes. Motion carries. So we're on to our next agenda item, which is committee reports. John, do you have a report from Planning Commission?
Not really. Planning Commission did not meet last month. They are going to meet, as we just said, in 2 weeks. I do have a question relative to the Planning Commission, to my colleagues on the board. As you all remember, last month we had a presentation from Ron Kilpatrick on the small home movement. He also made that presentation several months ago directly to the Planning Commission. So as the board representative to the Planning Commission, my question is, do we want to direct the Planning Commission and the zoning administrator to begin looking into potential ordinance recommendation changes to allow for smaller lots and smaller housing sizes?
Does anybody have any response to John's question? I think it's very important that we do that. I also think, as he talked about the extenuating circumstances, it might be better put off a little bit longer until we can get some of the things that we already have on our plate resolved. That's just my opinion. If anybody else wants to express an opinion.
I'm really excited about the, Kilpatrick project. So, but I know that there's a lot going on right now and things are kind of up in the air with, being in the office. So I don't know, it's up to, I imagine Lene would be doing the bulk of the work on that, wouldn't she? Or I don't know.
Yes, it would be
the time
Lene.
right now, but
I mean, my comment on that, you're right. I mean, that what you said, Supervisor Osmond, applies to like so much right now. But the next Planning Commission meeting, I think, has just 2 agenda items, and I would like to at least let them know that we've heard the same presentation, and we support exploring the potential for the future, and let them decide how. This isn't going to happen in a couple months, so.
No.
okay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, letting the Planning Commission discuss that. In order to schedule a public hearing, you need a lot more time than 2 weeks.
Oh, no,
So-
yeah, that's not what I'm asking. So they're just
as a discussion item, I think it's very appropriate for the Planning Commission to make that determination.
then I shall present that at the meeting at the end of this month.
Perfect.
If I can make a comment, if the board's going to make direction to the Planning Commission or formally request the Planning Commission further explore this topic, I would encourage it to be done in a motion.
This is Bigford. While I respect Supervisor Osmond's sensitivity towards everything that's going on and people having full plates and uncertainty and such, I do think it's appropriate for us to direct them to start that process. And we don't have to put timelines on it. They can take their time, but just to begin looking at that, I think it's appropriate to direct the Planning Commission to go forward with that.
I'll just give one little opinion. The Planning Commission doesn't need direction to do that. If they know that they have our support and understanding, giving them direction is a little bit more formal. I just think that they need to know that we're talking about it and we're not opposed.
So we don't want a motion right now, or?
Well,
Griffin?
That's fine. I mean, either way is completely up to you all. I think you're absolutely right that there's more than one way to do it. I mean, if you're looking for something specific and formal, a motion is most appropriate. But if you were just looking for John to bring the topic back up to see about getting it on the agenda for discussion, I don't have an issue. It's up to you all as the board.
Well, let's just not do a motion and
Oh.
John could
Who's
talk
gonna
to
make
the
a motion?
Okay, John, make a motion.
All right.
Do whatever you want.
Because we've directed them in the past, and not too often. I think we have a light touch. But it's been so long since they met with Ryan, and they haven't heard that we've met with Ryan. So I would like to entertain a motion to inform the Planning Commission and the zoning administrator of the board's interest in further pursuing the notion of allowing smaller homes and lot sizes in the township for their review and recommendation back to us.
Okay, I have a motion by Helmrich. Is there anyone who would like to support that motion?
This is Bigford. I'll support.
Okay, I have a motion by Helmrich, supported by Bigford. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Helmrich,
Yes.
Bigford,
Yes.
Aldrich,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Osmond, yes, motion carries. Okay, we'll hear from, anybody have a report from the road commission?
I have nothing new. Griffin, do you?
I have a few comments as they pertain to roads, but if it's okay with the board, I'll go over all of them together in the manager's comments/report section.
That sounds
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. Parks Commission, I think they're meeting later this month or next week.
The Parks Commission had a meeting last week. They hosted their first meeting via Zoom. They discussed some ongoing maintenance issues that staff is helping them to correct. And also noteworthy, they are considering hosting their July and August meetings in person at one of the township's parks, not only to promote safety and social distancing, but also to give residents who may not have had another opportunity to visit the parks a good excuse to go to visit them. But that's all the update I have at this time.
Can I say something a minute? Or?
Yes, please.
I wanted to say that the sidewalk, the new sidewalk is in on Allegan Road that the Parks Commission was working on, and I drove by the other day and there were like 6 people on it, and it looks really nice. And I think it fits in with the, you know, the community perfectly. I think it just is a real nice addition to connect that with the trail, and I commend them for getting that done.
Thank you. Very nice comment. Any other thing?
Yeah,
about
sorry.
the park?
Helmrich, I have a comment here. I put this on Facebook, I forget, 3-4 weeks ago. But the new trails and the new signage at River Bluff Park are amazing. And I implore anyone who's not been there in a while to check it out. Because I think the actual total amount of trails is doubled or tripled. And again, seeing them marked is really cool. So good stuff.
Cool.
Thank you, John. Anything else that anybody wants to comment about parks? Okay, we have next the Kalamazoo Lake Water and Sewer Authority. I don't see anybody that's available to make a report, although I think they are having a Zoom meeting coming up in the next week or so. So if anybody would like to attend, that would be interesting. Emergency Services Committee, Tony.
Yes. Just some final words for all that we've been doing here when it comes to working in the EMS system. At first, I want to thank Griffin there for all of the work that he's done, all the comments and direction that he's given us for the new ambulance contract. And in the past, he's always had some very good input on what we should be doing and looking at. What I want to say to each and every one of you, that EMS, Emergency Medical Services, is a team effort. And how big is that team? That team starts with the caller, the patient, the ambulance, the first responders, the police department, everybody involved, and that includes all of you guys. You guys have made a very important decision tonight to make our community safe and making sure that we have an ambulance that will respond in a reasonable amount of time And it's just a good thing. And you guys are part of that emergency services team. And that team goes on when the patient gets to the hospital, right to the person that discharges. And I did not understand that for many years being in EMS until I was taught that by a doctor at Bronson Hospital one time. We had some continuing education and realizing how big the team really is. And we are all working together. We all got the same goal. And I just want to thank you for all the work that you guys do on a regular basis.
Thank you, Tony. That was very nice.
Thank you.
Supervisor Osmond,
Yes.
I think you skipped by my fire board report.
Oh, I did skip by your fire board.
Want to hear it?
Yes, I do.
Okay. April was a very slow month. May made up for it, and it ended up with 83 calls. Year-to-date volume is 305, down 12% compared to last year. Type of calls are back to normal as well. EMS counts for 53% of the volume. Motor vehicle incidents are low due to the stay-at-home order. And Douglas and the township had 37 and 38% calls compared to Saugatuck City that lists 25%. And as Chief Janik said, there has been 6 structure fires in 30 days, which is really not typical. And there's no reason for the surge, but they've been very busy with that.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
Is there, let me see, where did it, now I'm all mixed up. Interurban report. I don't have that in front of me. Griffin, do you have that right in front of you?
I do. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, or summarize it.
Sure, it's not particularly wrong, so I'll run through it quickly. But as submitted by Lori Babinski, the Saugatuck Township representative on the Interurban Board, a budget adjustment was needed due to the pandemic from the loss of revenue expenses and ridership. The Transit Authority received 2 new buses from the 2019 grants. Also, a new administrative vehicle that replaced the minivan will be reimbursed through grant money. The 3 older vehicles are going up for bid. Ridership for April was 820 versus 3,680 last year, carrying about 30 passengers per day. Venetian Festival is canceled and summer ridership will be down with the loss of the parking shuttle and reduced visitors. COVID-19 response, continue to operate with only 1 bus per day, 4 staff members laid off. From May 3 to June 13, 7 of the current 9 employees have been enrolled in the work-share program through Michigan Unemployment. Bus and office cleaning procedures are in place. Signage at the office and on buses. Mask use is required in the office and for both drivers and passengers on buses. Director Yeef is developing a preparation and response plan. The board agreed to renew the current health insurance plan with the 5.5% increase and also renew the vision and dental plans as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Griffin. Open board report. We'll go one by one. Is there anybody who wants to start? Brenda?
I have nothing for you.
Thank you. Abby? Abby, do you have anything that you want to report?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I have just a couple things. Just given the nature of the stay-at-home order and quarantine, I think that with everything, we as a township board, you know, unfortunately, we just aren't having as much contact and there can be some distance and maybe not as much communication. So as you know, we're members of the MTA, and I think that they are offering a lot of their education for free right now. And I kind of looked at it prior to this meeting. Some of them are really like laser focused on certain, you know, things like cemeteries or payroll or budget, but there's other ones like exploring township revenue sources, which I think would be really appropriate, or meeting misconceptions, secrets to great board meetings. Just wondering if there's any interest in maybe, I don't know if we could do those together remotely, Griffin?
If there's more than 3 of you, if 3 or more of you are there, it would need to be, it more than likely would need to be a public meeting. Again, there's some exceptions for training, but my immediate recommendation would be if you want to do them together, maybe do them in groups of 2.
Okay. And my other comment is that I would like to, if there's nobody else that is on fire about exploring investment opportunities, I'd like to partner with Treasurer Helmrich on that project. I think that falls under your role of the treasurer, but I do think there's a great opportunity to look at investing our money in something other than CDs that we could yield, have greater yields. And I think there's a lot of opportunities that are really safe that we would get a little bit more bang for our buck. That's all.
Great comments. Thank you. Aldrich, do you have anything for the board?
No, I don't. Thanks.
Good. Helmrich?
Yes, thank you.
John?
Yeah, well, one of them, I was going to actually suggest that perhaps Trustee Bigford work with me on the investment policy. So we will talk about getting some communication going between us. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to share with everybody, and especially in light, Brenda made some reference earlier today about mask rules and such. I was on, I think I mentioned this already, but I was on a Michigan Municipal Treasurers Association Zoom with 66 treasurers from around the state today. And the focus obviously was, treasurers have some particular challenges because tax season starts July 1st. I just heard myself back. Okay. Anyway, my point is it was fascinating. And there's such a range of how townships, from some in the UP that have, a staff of 2. There's also cities involved with MMTA like Ann Arbor and Rochester. So I'm working on a memo that I want to share with everyone and with Manager Graham. And it's just to share some of these things that other municipalities are doing. We've adopted our procedures, and this could be potential tweaks. Some may not be appropriate from us. Some I'm more interested in, but not at the point of advocating for, as I said, relative to the tax season, because as you all know in the past, once the bills go out, maybe not this year so much, but in the past, people have started lining up to pay in person. So I want to share that with everyone and also get Manager Graham's input as well, just for future consideration and taking it from there, because I learned a lot. It also kind of, I wouldn't say scared me a lot, but it concerned me. So I want to share that. I want everyone to see it and be able to comment and weigh in appropriately, because we have a few more weeks before the month of July is upon us. And boy, we certainly got it between the weather and the pandemic. So thank you, and look for that memo tomorrow or Friday. Thanks.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. I just want to acknowledge some of the great stuff that this board and our township manager have accomplished in the last year. I mean, we have moved our agenda forward to a great place. And we're coming up to a point where we're going to have to make some serious decisions about what are our priorities and which way do we want to move the township forward. Do we want to be a regular general law township with minimal services and minimal funding? Or do we want to provide additional services with additional funding? And if so, what's the best way to do that? And how can we get ourselves educated? Again, I have to commend the manager and all of the board for getting so much done. I have a sheet in front of me with roll call on it, and I doubled the size of the roll call sheet, and I filled up all the lines already. So you've got a lot done. You've taken a lot of action, not just this meeting, but for the whole past year. So thank you.
Well, let me just thank you for joining our team a little later than the rest of us, but you've been an inspiration to work with. So thank you for those comments.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, guys. I think we're ready for the manager's report. Sorry if I keep losing track. My papers get on top of each other and I can't see which one I'm on. So I think we're ready for the manager report.
Absolutely. I'll start off just by thanking you all for your consideration and adoption of the budget this week. That's something staff's been working on really since the second half of January, if you can imagine. And as you all know, not only some of the format updates, but I'm going to use the term right sizing in some other categories. It was a significant undertaking, but that only happens with the guidance and support of the board. So I want to thank you all and acknowledge you all for that. Moving on to my report, I've got 4 things for you. Number 1 being, as you all know, the Township Board previously authorized 2 resolutions requesting speed studies to be conducted in the township. I received notice from the Road Commission today that they have both been completed and new signage is posted. So the stretch along 62nd Street is now posted at 45 miles an hour and has an active traffic control order. If you all remember, it was posted previously but was unenforceable. And 64th Street is now posted at between, I would have to go back and look, but the stretch of 64th Street that was tied to the speed study request is now posted at 40 miles an hour. Number 2, the township staff is back in the office. The township hall will be open to the public next week. As I mentioned briefly earlier, we are in the middle of our return to work transition. We also conducted safety workplace training, as mentioned by the treasurer. And I really want to ask the public and the board to continue to be patient and understanding as there are changes being implemented. The cliche line I keep using is there's absolutely a wrong way to do this transition, but unfortunately there's not a right or a perfect way. So we will continue to adjust and continue to do the best we can with what we have to work with. But as a reminder to all of you and to the members of the public who are still with us, the safety measures, the preventative measures, the restrictions, however you want to look at them, these are all being implemented for your safety and the safety of the township team. So we recognize the inconvenience of some of them, but as I said, please be patient with us. We're going to continue to do the best we can to provide high quality service. Number 3, Lakeshore Drive conversations has really picked up again over the last several weeks. They never stopped, but as you all know, in the thralls of the public health crisis, they absolutely slowed down, and some funding that had been allocated from the state was taken back, for the lack of a better term, and reallocated. So we're continuing to have conversations, and as Commissioner Kappinga mentioned earlier, my understanding is that Allegheny County and the Board of Commissioners are getting more involved in helping to find additional financial options. And lastly, there's been a significant amount of technology work conducted in the office over the last month, everything from replacing the township's server, updating email, replacing switches. And with that, there have been some technical difficulties, as you all have faced, and I appreciate your patience and flexibility with those. But I'm also pleased to announce these are probably long overdue, not only maintenance and replacements, but upgrades that the township needed to make to be able to conduct high quality business. So I'm pleased to announce we've been able to make a lot of those. We'll continue to make the tweaks necessary to adjust to the updates, but with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Griffin. Anybody have questions for Griffin? If not, we can move on to public comments. And I'll once again let Griffin kind of take charge of that and see who wants to speak.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Are there any members of the public who are still with us who would like to be added to the speakers list? Mr. Riley, are you interested in speaking again?
I would. I'd like to thank the board for their consideration and their attention on the buoy issue. You probably don't have a full understanding of what a large impact that is to us that live and enjoy this area along the river. So thank you again. And if there's anything we can do to help in any way, shape, or form, please do not hesitate to ask.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Riley. We've got one other number ending in 1291. Would you like to speak during public comment? Are there any?
Speak up, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd just like to make one comment that I'm extremely grateful to the way the board handled the buoy situation this evening. It has been a big concern to the residents of Riverside Estates, and I'm sure each and every one of them is the same as I am. A great thank you to the board. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
John Gay.
Pardon?
John Gay.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I don't see anybody, and with that, it's back to you, Cindy.
My number was up on the thing to speak. I just said I made a comment.
Thank you. I guess our next issue is to adjourn the meeting. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I will make a motion that we adjourn the June 10th, 2020 Saugatuck Township Board meeting at 7:56.
Ooh.
Is there anyone that would like to support that motion?
This is Brenda. I'd love to support.
Thank you. I have motion by Aldrich, supported by Marcy. Is there any further discussion? I will call the roll. Aldrich?
Yes.
Marcy?
Yes.
Bigford?
Yes.
Hemrick?
Yes.
Osmond? Yes. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
And I miss everybody.
I miss you too.
Yeah.